Hey there! In today's video, we're going to be going over the 2022-2023 TMSCA General Math Regional Test. Let's do it. Alright, number 31. The graphs of which linear equations below have a slope of 3/4. Alright, the way we solve this problem is, we take the coefficient of x, so in this case, let's take the first one, right? We have 8y equals 6x, so we take the coefficient, which is 6, and divide it by the coefficient of y, which is 8. So 6 over 8. Is that equal to 3/4? Yes, it is. So that means equation 1 has a slope of 3/4. Now let's check with equation 2. 12x plus 16y equals 3. Alright, so the first thing is we have to bring this 12x to the other side before we can do this. So let's do this. We can subtract 12x from both sides to make this 16y equals negative 12x plus 3. Alright, now what we have to do is we take the coefficient of x, which is negative 12, and divide it by 16. Negative 12 over 16 is not equal to 3 over 4. Negative 12 over 16, that's negative 3 over 4. Negative 3 over 4 is not the same as 3 over 4. So 2 does not work. Alright, now let's go on to 3. So we already have this in the formula 1. 2y minus 9 equals 1.5x. Alright, so that's just the coefficient of x, which is 1.5 divided by the coefficient of y, which is 2. 1.5 over 2 is yes. That is equal to 3/4. So 3 also works out. And finally, we have 4. Since there's no value of y, like there's no coefficient of y, it's just 1. And 3/4 is the coefficient of x. When you divide anything by 1, it's just the same thing. So that means the slope is going to be 3/4. So that means that works as well. So now we know that 1, 3, and 4 work, and that's your answer. Next, number 32. What is the length of the line segment with endpoints of -10, 5, and 6, -3? Alright, so there's a formula for this problem. This is called the distance formula. This is how you find the length of a line with the endpoints. So the formula for distance is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared and the square root of that. So how do we do this? So we'll plug in our values. So let's just say that this is coordinate 1 and this is coordinate 2, which would make -10 x1 and 5 y1. And then on here we make 6 x2 and -3 y2. So when we plug in the values, we get the distance is equal to the square root of 6 minus -10. When you subtract the negative, that's just adding. So 6 plus 10. And then square this. Plus the difference between -3 minus 5. -3 minus 5, that's just -8. The -8, this is a squared thing, right? So -8 squared is just 64. So this is 64. And then we have 16 squared over here. 16 squared is 256. 266 plus 64. And we're trying to find the square root of that. So 256 plus 64, that's just 320. So the distance is equal to the square root of 320. Now, we need to simplify this value because square root of 320 is not the most simple answer we can get. So the way we further break up this square root of 320 is we see the perfect squares that are factors of 320. So for example, 64 times 5 is the same thing as 320. We know that 64 is a perfect square because 8 squared is 64. So we can actually bring this outside of the square root and just take the square root of 64. The square root of 64, that's just 8. So it becomes 8 outside the square root and 5 left over inside. And since 5 cannot be factored anymore to have any perfect squares, that is your answer. Next, number 33. The sum of 3 consecutive integers is 261. What is the value of 5 less than the least integer? Alright, this might seem like a pretty hard problem, but it's actually pretty simple. So 3 consecutive integers add up to 261. So let's just say this equals 261. We need to figure out what this side is. So if there's 3 consecutive integers, that means the least integer and the second least integer is just going to be 1 plus the least integer, and then the greatest integer is going to be the least plus 2, like this. So all we have to do is to find the sum of these three is just x plus 1 plus x plus 2. So when we do that, we get 3x plus 3 equals 261. And this is to solve for the least integer. So now we have to get 3x by itself. So let's subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. This cancels out and this becomes 258. So 3x equals 258. Alright, that means we can divide both sides by 3 to get the value of x, which is the least integer. 258 divided by 3, that's just 86. And 3x divided by 3 is x. So x equals 86, which means the least integer is 86. Now, we need to find the value of 5 less than the least integer. So that's just 86 minus 5, which is 81, and that's your answer. Next, number 34. What is the simple interest of depositing $2,500 into an account paying 3% after 36 months? Alright, the first thing we need to do is we need to simplify this 36 months into 3 years to solve this problem. Alright, so the formula for simple interest, let's just call this SI, is equal to price, which is in this case 2,500, times rate, which in this case is 3%, times time, which in this case is 3 years. Alright, so our simple interest in this case would be 2,500 times 3%, which is also just 3 over 100, times 3. Alright, so first thing we can do is we can get rid of this fraction by doing these two divide and these two divide, because these two zeros will cancel out. So this becomes 25 times 3 times 3. 25 times 3 is 75, and 75 times 3 is 225, which means the simple interest of depositing $2,500 into an account paying 3% after 3 years is just $225, and that's your answer. Next, number 35. Negative of the absolute value of 11 minus 32 minus the absolute value of 19 plus a negative 11 equals what? Alright, so in this case, the absolute value, right, in this problem, what this absolute value means is whatever we get from inside the absolute value statement is just going to become positive. So if it's already positive, it's going to stay positive, and if it's negative, it's going to become positive. So let's solve this problem. So we have a negative of the absolute value of 11 minus 32, then close the absolute value minus the absolute value of 19 plus negative 11, close the absolute value. And this is what we're trying to find. Alright, so first, 11 minus 32. 11 minus 32, that's just negative 21. However, when you do the absolute value, that becomes positive 21. But then we also have this negative sign out here, so it just returns to negative 21. Alright, that is going to be subtracting the absolute value of 19 plus negative 11. When you add a negative number, you're just subtracting. So that's 19 minus 11. 19 minus 11, that's just 8, which is a positive number. So it really doesn't matter about the absolute value, but it just keeps it positive. So then this becomes 8, but you're subtracting it, so it's minus 8. So now we have negative 21 minus 8. Negative 21 minus 8. So when we subtract a negative number from a negative number, the result is just negative again. So it's going to be negative 29. You're basically just adding with the negative sign in front. And now we have negative 29, and that's your answer. Next, number 36. 18.8 times 10 to the power of 12 over 8 times 10 to the power of negative 3 equals what in scientific notation? Alright, so we have this scientific notation, the division problem here, right? So we could individually solve the numerator denominator and then figure out what the division is, or we can count these as variables and just subtract the exponents and then divide. So we have 10, negative 3. Alright, so first let's break this up into 18.8 divided by 8 multiplied by 10 power 12 divided by 10 power negative 3. So 18.8 divided by 8, that's just 2.35. 2.35 times 10 to the power of 12 divided by 10 to the power of negative 3. When you divide two of the same number or same value with different exponents, all you do is you subtract the bottom exponent from the top one. So this becomes 10 to the power of 12 minus negative 3. When you subtract the negative, you're just adding. So it's 12 plus 3, which is 15. So 10 to the power of 15. So that's just 2.35 times 10 to the power of 15, and that's your answer. Next, number 37. 225 degrees equals how many radians? Alright, so to convert from degrees to radians, all you have to do is multiply the amount of degrees, and so in this case 225, times pi over 180. So this becomes 225 pi over 180 in radians. However, we need to simplify this fraction. 225 and 180. Those two are both divisible by 45 because 45 times 5 is 225 and 45 times 4 is 180. So if we divide 45 from both of these numbers, it becomes 5 pi over 4. And that's your answer. Next, number 38. If 2x minus 11 times 7x plus 3 is equal to 14x squared plus bx minus 33, then find the value of negative 2b. Alright, to solve this problem, we know that b is just the coefficient of x, which means to find that, we need to do binomial multiplication of 2x minus 11 and 7x plus 3. So let's do that. We're going to do that using a square. So 7x plus 3 and 2x minus 11. So let's do this. So first, 7x times 2x. That's 14x squared. Next, 2x times 3. That's just 6x. Next, 7x times negative 11. That is negative 77x. Finally, negative 11 times 3. That's negative 33. When we put this together, we get 14x squared minus 71x minus 33. So now we can see that the coefficient of x is negative 71, which means b is equal to negative 71. And we're trying to find the value of negative 2b, which means all we have to do is negative 2 times negative 71. That gets us 142, and that's your answer. Next, number 39. What is the rate of decay of the exponential decay function f of x is equal to 3 times 3/5 of x? Alright, so we have f of x equals 3 times 3/5 x, correct? So this number inside the parentheses, that's called the factor. Now depending on the size of the factor, it's either decay or growth. So if it's less than 1, it's decay. If it's greater than 1, then it's growth. Alright, now we need to see which one is it. So 3/5 is less than 1, which means 3/5 is the decay factor of this exponential function. Now, how do we find the decay rate? Well, the decay rate is just going to be 1 minus the decay factor. We're going to call it df. So if the decay factor is 3/5, it's just 1 minus 3/5. 1 minus 3/5 is the same as 5/5 minus 3/5, which means the rate of decay is 2/5, or in other words, 40%. And that's your answer. Number 40. If x varies directly as y, and x is equal to 14 when y is equal to 68, find the value of x when y equals 408. Alright, this is actually pretty simple. So when they say x varies directly as y, that means y is equal to k of x. So in this part right here, they're given that x is 14 and y is 68. That means that 68y is equal to 14x. So y is equal to 14 over 68x. Alright, now we have this fraction right here. This is a proportion. So now they're asking us to find the value of x when y is equal to 408. So we know that the denominator is 408, and we're trying to find this value up here. Now this fraction, this is a proportion, right? So we have to be equal to 14 over 68. One thing we can realize here is that 68 is just 408 divided by 6, or 408 is just 68 times 6. So we multiply by 6 to get to this fraction, which means to get from 14 to the numerator of this fraction, all we have to do is multiply by 6. 14 times 6 is 84, and that's your answer. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to show your support. These videos take a lot of effort to make, and I would really appreciate it.